Welcome, everyone, to the Thursday edition of our Packers News live chat alongside Tom Silverstein. I am Olivia Reiner. The Packers wrapped up their 3-day mandatory minicamp today. We'll bring you the latest news from the team, plus we'll also break down all 3 days of minicamp in just a moment. However, before we begin, as always, you can be a part of our conversation. If you're over on Facebook, Periscope, or YouTube, leave us a question down in the chat. Tom and I would love to hear from you. We'll get to some of your thoughts toward the end of our conversation today. If quarterback Aaron Rodgers returns, and yes, that is a big if, he could be welcomed by 4 other quarterbacks, and the Packers could field, if they really wanted to, an entire offensive line with quarterbacks alone. Again, a very big if. That's because there are now 5 quarterbacks technically on the roster after the Packers signed quarterback Jake Dolegala, who's a third-year quarterback in the league. Why does it make sense for the Packers to continue to hoard quarterbacks heading into training camp?
Well, you need 4 quarterbacks in training camp to run all the plays, to run the plays against the defense. You need at least 2 quarterbacks to run the offense, and you probably need 3, really. And then you need at least 1 other quarterback who can run the defense, run plays against the defense. So traditionally you see teams with 4 quarterbacks for the first 2 weeks of training camp, and then they'll pare down to 3. They got 4 because they don't know whether Aaron Rodgers will be there. So why not give a guy a chance? He was a tryout player. He spent the whole year with Cincinnati as their number 3. So, he's on New England's practice squad. So somebody saw something in him.
Yesterday, we discussed the signing of inside linebacker Devondre Campbell. Tom, you reported on the details of his contract today. Let's take a look at that right now. So when you look at these numbers, Campbell, it's a 1-year deal, $2 million contract that includes a $1.01 million signing bonus, not to mention up to $500,000 in playtime incentives. When I see something like this, when I see this contract, this tells me that Campbell will be on the initial 53. How much of a contributor do the Packers expect Devondre Campbell to be?
Well, I think they signed him as a starter. I really do. I think this guy has been a starter since practically the day he stepped on the field. Five straight years he's been a starter. He only started 10 games as a rookie, but he's been a regular starter and pretty productive. And from what I, received from scouts, that they like him, or at least one, I should say. They think he's a good, tall linebacker who can drop into coverage, give you a lot of range, can cover tight ends, and I think that's kind of what they need. I think Barnes and Martin are more run stuff guys, and I think Campbell will probably get a good chance to play a lot.
Let's move on to an unfortunate update for a Packers tight end. Sternberger has been suspended by the NFL for 2 games this upcoming regular season for violating the league's substance abuse policy. This is just yet another setback in Sternberger's career. Last year, having tested positive for COVID-19 early in the season, and then also dealing with a concussion during his career. How does this setback impact him going forward this season?
Man, he just faces one hurdle after the other, and it's really been a roadblock for him to get it going. And this will be too. The good part about, and I agree with this policy for the NFL, is they allow him to attend training camp and go through everything, and then he has to sit out the 2 games. So, it's not the end of the world for him. I don't know what the issues are, why he was suspended. They don't ever tell us that, and maybe he will at some point. But 2 games is not an eternity. Aaron Jones had a game that he was suspended with, and other players have had suspensions for 1 or 2 games. He can come back and make a good season of it. It's kind of up to him. What was really funny was that I made that comment to you on the sideline. I saw him and I was like, wow, he looks pretty good. It looks like he's been in the weight room. And, he may have really been ready to play, but this is a setback for the start of the season, especially if Josiah DeGuara's knee isn't quite up to snuff either.
Let's move on to discuss today's final day of mandatory minicamp. Today was more or less, in my eyes, defined by the defense. We saw the defensive front create some pressure and disrupt the pocket, force quarterback Jordan Love to throw on the fly a little bit more often. We also saw some big plays from rookie cornerbacks. Eric Stokes had an interception, and Shamar Jean-Charles made a pass breakup on Marquez Valdes-Scantling. How would you characterize today's final day of minicamp?
I'm going to say that it was pretty non-eventful, worthless, just a practice. I am one of these people who can't get excited by guys running around in shorts. And, you see certain players shine, and it's really more about the skill players. I agree there was a lot of pressure on Jordan Love. I think that comes down to blocking assignments. I saw a couple of blown blocking assignments. So, you take it with a grain of salt. I don't think there was anything where someone stood out to the point where you were like, wow, that's really impressive. No, Mason Crosby hit almost all his field goals, including one from 55. So
I think he missed the first attempt from 55.
He did. He missed one from 55. Yep.
Not to throw Mason Crosby under the bus, however. Yes, it's very early. Everyone's in shorts, no pads, minimal contact. Not a ton can be gleaned from these sessions. However, it's what's going on, and any experience for these players right now at this point in the offseason is good experience. We'll be able to share a little bit more useful information as we get into training camp. Let us head over to Facebook, Periscope, and YouTube now for some of your questions. This is the best part of the show, in my opinion. So thank you all for joining us. Let's take a question here from Mike on Facebook. Mike wants to know how much Jordan Love has improved since last year. We've seen very limited glimpses of Jordan Love. Yesterday, Tom, you were not at practice. However, we got to see a pretty impressive version of Jordan Love compared to some of the practices that we've seen in the past. We saw him connect on a couple of deep balls. We saw him have a successful 2-minute drill. That being said, given the fact that we haven't seen him very much, and we really didn't get to see him much last year, how much does Jordan Love look like he's improved?
Well, there's no question he's improved. I think you could see his footwork is really steady. His decision-making is better. He didn't even know where to go with the ball a lot of the time that we saw him in camp, and that was very limited. He had such a limited off season. So yeah, there's a lot of improvement there, and there will be during training camp. It's hard to say because really Matt LaFleur is trying to teach everybody or get everybody to run certain plays. And sometimes the defense against it is not a good defense to run that play. Sometimes it is. I looking at him, he reminds me of any quarterback I've seen that has taken the next step. So he can get to the line. He can, he's starting to use the hard count to get people to jump. He's making quick decisions when he has to. He's throwing the ball away when he needs to. Those are all good signs. But once the pads come on, we'll see whether he can, really make some completions and move in the pocket and all that kind of stuff.
Thanks, Mike, for your question. Let's take a question from Jim on Facebook. Jim asks, how has cornerback Eric Stokes looked in practice? I mentioned a little bit earlier today that, yes, he had an interception, so making some plays early on here in his tenure with the Packers, albeit in minicamp. But that being said, a lot that was made of Eric Stokes going into this offseason program was his speed. 4.25 40. Whether or not you completely buy that measurement or that time is up to you. However, Tom, what have you seen from Eric Stokes very early on in his tenure here in Green Bay?
Well, just what you said, he can fly. I believe he's a 4.25, and even if he isn't, he was the fastest cornerback in the draft. And he's a big guy too, which you just don't see all that often. The one thing we know, the interception was kind of a gimme. Jordan Love was going to get sacked anyway, so he just kind of threw it out there. But shoot, if you can get him in the open field after an interception, he's going to score. I guess the big thing for him and the big knock on him has been that he has no ball skills. But boy, he can make up for any mistake with his speed, and that's going to be kind of fun to watch. We haven't really seen anybody with that kind of speed since Sam Shields was here.
Thanks, Jim, for your question. Let's take a question from YouTube. John wants to know, comparative to Aaron Rodgers in his second year in the league, how does Love look at this stage? Oh boy, Tom, I'm going to need you to try and rewind.
I don't remember that far back. I don't remember all that much about Aaron Rodgers. He struggled in preseason games. He had some real struggles. I mean, broke his foot in that one game. I don't know. It's two different animals here because Jordan Love was in a college spread offense and probably not as ready as Rodgers was. And I can't say there's a comparison at all.
It's a good question, John. Thank you, though, for your question. We appreciate it. Let's take a question from Darren. Darren wants to know if Devin Funchess will be the number 2 receiver this year. If you look at Devin Funchess, he opted out due to COVID-19 concerns of last season. The year before that, he missed all but one game due to a shoulder injury in 2019. So he hasn't played football in 2 years. But that being said, what are the expectations for Funchess heading into this upcoming season?
I don't think he'll be the number 2. I think Allen Lazard or Valdez-Scantling will be number 2, and I think they'll probably be 2 and 3. And Amari Rodgers will be right in there too. I question, and it's early, we need to see camp, but there's always a chance Funchess won't even make the team. I mean, he's been out for a whole year. There wasn't a ton of interest in him when he did sign with the Packers. Let's reserve and see what happens when camp starts. I mean, he is a very, very talented guy, but I want to see what sitting out a year does to him.
Thank you, Darren, for your question. Steve wants to know, from your perspective, do you think this whole drama with Aaron Rodgers has divided the fan base, or is this just people tired of the same drama? Is it possible that it could be multiple things, Tom? I know Mark Murphy had a discussion on his monthly column on Packers.com about exactly this topic, more or less, that this drama has divided the fan base. And I think people were a little bit put off by that statement, although I would judge just based on the comments that we get, what I've seen on Twitter, I think some people would agree with that. So from your perspective, Tom, has this drama divided the fan base?
Well, I was going to answer the 2 questions by saying yes. And basically, it's both of those things. It split the fan base and people are tired of the drama. I don't think it can go any other way. That's my read of it. And it'll go one way or the other based on what he does. The fan base will be against him if he isn't here. I can guarantee you that.
We'll see how this all gets resolved as the weeks continue. We get closer to training camp and the regular season. Let's take a question here from Levi. Levi wants to know if tight end Robert Tonyan is getting locked down long-term anytime soon. The Packers tendered Tonyan as a restricted free agent this offseason, so he's on a 1-year deal with the team this year. After that, or even potentially earlier, do you think the Packers will sign him to a long-term extension?
So I don't think they would do it until November or December if he's having another really great year. They had a chance to do it this year with the restricted. They could have just tried to sign him to a long-term deal instead of messing around with the tender and making it more cap friendly, although they did end up restructuring it, the tender. No, I think it'll happen middle of the season, end of the season, or early in free agency. But they got to make sure that last year wasn't just a one-time deal. They need to see more.
Thank you, Levi, for your question. Francesco on Facebook wants to know, 13 years after the disasters combined with Favre, now serious communications with Rodgers. Will Mark Murphy's work finally be at risk? If you look at the past two quarterback controversies, I mean, the Packers have had a lot of success under both Brett Favre and Aaron Rodgers. These situations, we'll see how Aaron Rodgers' situation works out compared to Brett Favre. That being said, how much does Mark Murphy's future depend on whether or not Aaron Rodgers returns and the future success of the franchise if Rodgers doesn't return?
Yeah, that's the whole key. So if he doesn't return, what happens? Do they just, if the team goes in the tank, then someone's going to pay for it. And it's either going to be Murphy or it's going to be Gutekunst, or it could be both, depending on what the team does. But Murphy's out there. He's the one who created all this 3 silos or whatever crap that is, where there's all this great communication, and apparently there isn't great communication. So, he's the top guy is always being looked at, and if this thing just explodes in the Packers' face, there'll be there could be some consequences.
Thank you, Francesco, for your question. Let's take a question, go back to Levi here. Will Gutekunst be willing to pay Jair Alexander close to Jalen Ramsey money? Jair is going to break the bank. When Jair Alexander is due for a new contract, which is rapidly approaching, how much money do you think Gutekunst will have to pay him if they decide to keep him around, which one would think they want to?
Yeah, it'll be top dollar. I don't know if it'll be Jalen Ramsey money. I don't know if Jair Alexander is Jalen Ramsey yet. He's good. He needs to have a big year to get that kind of money. He needs to get some interceptions. He's a very good player, and they could always franchise him if he's not willing to take what they give him. But before you give him top dollar, I mean the top dollar, give him, like they did with David Bakhtiari, you got to make sure the guy is the best player in the league, or best cornerback in the league. And he still has a little ways to go before you can say that.
Thank you, Levi, for another great question. We appreciate it. Let's go over to Tosh Myers, any relation to Josh Myers, on Periscope. They want to know, they say Jordan Love has the traits in a great system with weapons learned under Rodgers. Why won't he be great? The only answer that I have to that is we just don't know. We haven't seen him play in an NFL speed game. We haven't seen him play at the very least in the preseason, let alone the regular season. How much are we going to be able to glean from these upcoming preseason games as it relates to Love?
Well, I would answer, how come Justin Harrell, how come Jamal Reynolds, how come every single guy who's busted out in the NFL didn't make it? It's not because they didn't have talent. It's because some combination of something they didn't have that made them great. And there's a lot of factors. So, I don't, there's nothing that we can say right now that guarantees that Jordan Love's going to be a great quarterback, but he is in a good circumstances, as you pointed out. And I don't know if he could be in better situation with the offensive line he's got, with the talent around him, and a really good coach. So it's just that in year 2, great is relative. You can only be so great in year 2. It's going to take some time with him.
Patience is always the name of the game in any situation, including this situation. But thank you so much for your question. Let's go back to Levi. Levi's just firing off the questions today. Levi wants to know if Josiah DeGuara is going to have a big role in the offense this year as he rehabs an ACL injury, or could Dominique Dafney eat into his playing time? The Packers picked up Dafney as a free agent late in the season, and Dafney was pretty much the answer to try and fill that role that DeGuara once played earlier in the season. The Packers threw several different players, including Jay Sternberger, in that H-back/fullback type of role, dealt with some different injuries, and Daphne was someone who was able to work his way up from just taking special team snaps to finally catching touchdown passes from Aaron Rodgers against the Chicago Bears at Soldier Field. How are the Packers going to balance having both DeGuara and potentially Daphne on the roster? Is it even possible to carry that many tight ends?
Well, Daphne can serve as a fullback probably, but so does DeGuara. It's possible. DeGuara is the guy. I mean, he is. They drafted him high for a reason, and that knee injury was a huge disappointment for the Packers, because in that first game, he played amazingly, and they expected a lot out of him. And he's like a chess piece, he's the queen. He can move anywhere, line up anywhere, and I think they had big plans for him last year. And as long as his knee is okay this year, they're going to have big plans for him this year. Daphne will have to work to make the team. He's got to beat somebody out to make the team. He could keep 4 tight ends, but he's pretty multidimensional too. He's just not a special guy like DeGuara. That's what you're up against if you're Daphne.
Thank you, Levi, again for the great question, and thank you all so much for joining us. We will be back next week as the Packers wrap up the OTAs. I believe Tuesday is the last day that is open to the media, so we will try to come back to you all and have another conversation once again. For Tom Silverstein, I am Olivia Reiner. We will see you next time.